So, hello everyone. We are starting the next session. The theme of the session is manufacturing in India and building the backbone of the $5 trillion economy in India. And these are our two speakers, and it is very extremely proud of me to mention Mrs. Nyrika Holkar. Mrs. Nyrika Holkar is the executive director of Godrej and Boyce, which is a part of the Godrej Enterprises Group, one of the India's largest conglomerates, which is built on engineering, design, and sustainability. The Godrej name has been part of the India story for over 125 years, from the first indigenously made lock to components on Chandrayaan-3. And as everyone knows, that every great institutions needs someone who can honor the legacy and can take it forward. And Mrs. Nyrika is doing exactly that. She also leads the digital strategy, brand, legal, and M&A for Godrej and Boyce and its subsidiaries, and drive a company-wide strategy. Beyond the business, she also serves on the boards of Naroji Godrej Center for Plant Research and Center for the Advancement of Philanthropy, which provides legal and compliance support to the NGOs across India. She's also on the board of the United World Colleges Committees India and is also a part of the Advisory Council for the Sustainable Futures Collaborative. So everyone, please join me in the welcoming Mrs. Nyrika Holkar. It's very proud for me to mention our second guest is Mr. Perses Bilimoria. He has been deemed as a visionary environmentalist. So long before the sustainability became a global priority, our next speaker has been already building a solution for it. He is the founder and the CEO of Earth Soul India, the country's first international certified manufacturer of biodegradable and compostable products, and has been the forefront of climate change and also providing the important solutions to address it. He is also an honorary visiting fellow of the University of Cambridge Judge Business School and was also the honorary consul for the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg for the Maharashtra, Gujarat, and got a recognition of its decades of contribution of India's sustainability agenda. He's also an advocate of systemic change and has been focusing on climate change risk assessment and corporate sustainability. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Perses Bilimoria. You can take off.
Hi, thank you everyone for having, first Nyrika for being here. It's an immense pleasure, and I must say that for me it's very emotional because I didn't expect that I would be interviewing in a sense or even conversing with the grandniece of a gentleman who I held in great esteem, the late Sorabji Godrej, who sowed the seeds in my life for everything to do around nature. So it's an immense pleasure to have you over here. On a lighter note, if I may, I have always associated Godrej with good and green, and it's ironical that you're here in a green outfit, which I think commends everything. So if I may kick off the conversation, and let's keep it as casual as possible. Tell us something about the founding story, about Godrej, the lock patent, the failures, and the whole journey that went into shaping the conglomerate that it is now.
Thank you so much for having me here today. It's a privilege to be here, and also to know the influence that Soli Uncle had on your life. And I think that same influence remains today. A very large part of the group's outlook is because of his visionary stewardship at a time when a lot of social issues were championed by him and actually found space in the world, whether it's stewardship of the wetlands on our own campus in Vikhroli, or even the whole concept of family planning, which he was such a champion of. By the group, if one has to look back on the 129-year history, started by my great-granduncle Adishar. And when he started the business, before he started, actually, he did a venture in surgical instruments and, took a loan, managed to manufacture them in India and wanted to sell them to the UK. And at that time, there was a lot of, it was around the time before independence, and it was something which was not looked upon very fondly, and was suggested to him to remove the Made in India tag and not look at that as the USP. And he felt so deeply about the ability of Indian manufacturing to compete with the best in the world. And he was willing to lose money on the order. He was willing even for the business to fail to really uphold his belief and principles. Unfortunately, the business did fail at that time. And then later on, he teamed up with his brother to start the first business of what is the Godrej Group today, which is the business of locks. And he got the global patent for the first springless lock. And it was something that is a matter of great pride to us. And also an example of his belief and seeing his belief come to life in that idea of political freedom needs to be supplemented by economic freedom for it to be truly successful, and one without the other cannot exist. And so that really laid the foundations for the group as it is today, and I think always is a sobering reminder to us that failure need not inhibit ambition, but if it can give a clearer understanding of how to achieve it, then it's something which is very relevant and important for all of us to carry in our lives, and all the more relevant even today.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. We didn't know most of the anecdotes that you mentioned, but yeah, I think this all goes into the fact that you have in your DNA the entrepreneurship skills, but you also have the ethos and the integrity and the passion that goes with it to combine the essentials of a legacy conglomerate as I see it. And I think it's so important that this whole concept of a legacy conglomerate is for the next generation, something that can endure and survive even the most difficult times. So if you were to look as a climate change researcher, I wouldn't say 100 years because I know that might be a tall order. But if you were to look at the next decade or 2 decades even, to the future of the group that you will be spearheading or are spearheading in a sense, what would you, in a sense, want to preserve and continue as a legacy, and what do you think you might want to change in the way business has been done in the past to what it needs to happen in the future? What would be the few changes you can see, and what are the few legacies that you would like to endure and continue within the circle of business?
Yeah. So I think that, what I'm reminded of is a story of the cupboard, the Godrej Almirah, which found its way in most Indian homes. And and really became not so much a piece of furniture, but really a keeper of stories and a keeper of emotions. And in a lot of cases was also passed down from one generation to the next. And so today, I think as we look at the cupboard, even from a furniture perspective, it still accounts for 50% of the turnover of the furniture business, and still a very important category for us. But this whole idea of legacy, and you mentioned it in the question, that the idea of legacy is a double-edged sword, and it, of course, has the expertise, experience that has, been compounded over the years. But it does also have a negative connotation, in the sense that you're a legacy company, and and therefore what becomes paramount today as we look at the world is how does one build relevance? And if the past 100 years was about building trust, whether it was trust in the home, the privilege of being part and seeing Indian households evolve, or whether, it's in terms of, let's say, the diversification into aerospace, into precision engineering, into and also future technologies that we're incubating. I think the idea of trust is really something that is the most important. And even today, when we, when we do research on, let's say, brand health and reputation, trust is still something that comes out as one of the most important associations that the brand has been able to build. And I think that is extremely valuable, has been built over time, and can be eroded in the blink of an eye. And therefore, the responsibility is immense, because it is important to really bring that trust into, let's say, a contemporary situation where you have, let's say, the Gen Z or a younger audience. And if we have to look at our core customer, very loyal, has, a lot of faith, has a lot of memory, has a lot of emotional connect. But the younger generations, less so. There's no, we have to, therefore, although, trust has been built and we've had the privilege of having that, it's not a given. And in the future, it has to be chosen by each generation. And therefore, I would think the road ahead and the objectives that we would need to think about are really, how do we build relevance with a younger consumer? How do we build relevance in a global scenario? And how do we build relevance in terms of what the brand stands for today? And I think that will really be the challenge of the next 100 years or so, because I think that is really what we have to be able to do to ensure that the brand survives.
So I think that what you stated is it is a big challenge going forward. And how do you see yourself fitting into the shoes and being able to, what is perhaps one strong guiding force that enables you to fit into the shoes of your past and to take it into the future? What do you see as your single biggest challenge for the next 5 or 10 years? You've mentioned the coping with the new generation and the next generation, but other than that, are you seeing any changes in values, in in technology, in embracing technologies, AI. How do you see all that playing out in your sphere of work?
Yeah. So we recently did sort of a brand repositioning about 2 years ago. And the idea behind that was not merely a color change or, a refreshed identity. But really the underpinning thought was, how does one remain relevant? And to that end, what more do we need to do in terms of really looking at design-led innovation across our businesses? And if we have to look broadly at our businesses, because they are very diverse, but where they really come together is we have people first, which is our consumer businesses, nation first, which would be more of the advanced engineering, and future first, which would be more of kind of incubated technologies like batteries and green hydrogen and recycled concrete. And between these, how does one really, because I think, of course, in the past, mechanical fabrication, manufacturing, engineering is our core expertise. But today, people are looking beyond products to experiences. And how do we really build experiences that are relevant, that are useful, and that are loved? And the third aspect, importantly, is in this world where climate shocks and weather patterns and instability are very much a part of the operating paradigm. How do we really, as a company and as a brand, do more to build and to give customers the option to make more conscious choices? And I think these, sort of three areas are areas that are important for us to prioritize and build upon as we think about, the three clusters of businesses going forward. And especially for our advanced engineering businesses, I think the building capability is really something which is very important, very strategic, and also something that we need to be able to steward and carry on. And so I think it is a very important discussion on how does one build capabilities that are relevant for India as India stands at a crossroads to become Viksit Bharat by 2047. What does it really mean to be a developed country? And economy is one part of it, but development is much wider than that. And to be able to do that, we really have to look at India's priorities for Viksit Bharat and layer on top of that the global priorities, and how does a brand like us fit into the mix, and how do we really do more to be able to further the objectives of the country, as well as promote what our founding fathers believed in, to say that Indian companies can compete with the best in the world, and they must and they should. And how do we bring that to life in the modern world?
That's interesting, which brings me to the next point, Nyrika, and we've been talking about this a few months ago, is how are you able to factor in the leapfrogging innovative technologies that are happening globally across the world and place them into the Indian context? Because we've had these conversations that the IITs of India and the IIMs of India are hotbeds for innovation as well. But we don't hear much about that. And I'm just wondering whether, is there a role, particularly at GEB, that you all might want to consider? Is how would you cross-fertilize innovation between the global world and the India context to actually make India and corporate India more resilient in the years ahead? Is there a potential that you're working on to bridge global innovation with Indian innovation at all?
Yeah, so I think both the challenge and the opportunity of India today is that when we look at the developed world and how it's developed and the paradigm in which it's developed, and then look at India, I think there is also a huge opportunity because a lot, and they say nearly 70% of whether it's the built environment is yet to be built. I think there's a lot of, it's a country which is building itself, and that also allows for the space to evaluate what has worked in the West and what hasn't worked, and to take those learnings to be able to leapfrog in India, and I think also this whole connection between academia and industry. We do a lot of, different ways in which we collaborate with academia, whether it's, through MOUs with IITs and other engineering institutions to really connect intellectual horsepower with practical everyday problems and what industry faces, and how because academia doesn't have the perspective of industry, and industry may lack the intellectual horsepower of academia. So how does one bring that together? So at least at Godrej, we are trying to do more to deepen the connect, whether it's through research, whether it's product development, and also just looking at problem statements of, let's say, manufacturing with different kinds of materials, and looking at those aspects. And then the other is really how within industries, how does one really share learnings? Yeah. And it's the world today, I think, will be reframed from a collaboration perspective. So how can industry collaborate more with each other to be able to scale and also look at problems from a shared perspective. And one of the platforms that we started 3 years ago, Conscious Collective, looks at, it's brand agnostic, but looks at kind of creating a platform to bring together urban planners, architects, designers, conservationists, policymakers, civil society, and really look at 3 key aspects. One is the built environment and how do we build more sustainably. The second is material science and looking at alternative materials that are more sustainable and circular. And the third is biodiversity, which, how do we have more nuanced conversations about biodiversity and the loss of it. And I think today, unfortunately in India, it's a very polarized discussion. If you have a discussion about, saving the trees, you are anti-development. And does progress necessarily need to be a binary? And can we really look at and we were doing a study on wetlands with the WWF and WRI and Stanford's Natural Capital Group, and trying to look at two use cases, urban use cases, because the urban context is the most pressing and difficult because you have so many competing concerns. So we are looking at Mumbai and we're looking at Chennai as two kind of urban examples of wetlands and being able to survive and thrive in a metropolis where you have so many different competing needs and also in terms of, you know, what is for the greater common good. And here we're really looking at building scenarios of, let's say, complete development on the one hand and complete conservation on the other hand. And how does one have practical, nuanced discussions on and putting a dollar and biophysical value to the services, the ecosystem services that mangroves provide? Because it's very easy, and unfortunately it has to be put in economic terms for it to have relevance or importance. And therefore, how do we have a different kind of discussion that's not polarized, but looking at the trade-offs of those ecosystem services, and how does one have a better discussion with policymakers? Because also the idea of once you lose primary forest, you cannot just transplant or replant because all of the millennia of knowledge, of intelligence, of sustenance that is in the ecosystem cannot be replicated. And how does one really value that?
Yeah, I think what you mentioned is so important, and this brings me to a point of a topic called natural capital. And I remember in 2016 talking at the Bombay Stock Exchange, where I said, I hope that in the next few years, companies in India would, in their balance sheets, have something called natural capital, because unless we build this into the framework of the financial systems, at some point there's going to be an implosion. And it's now beginning to take shape. People are beginning to listen to things. But you know, something which has struck me as being a little awkward is there's a corporation called the B Corp globally. And I find it a bit disturbing that in India, you have hardly 1 or 2 or 3 B corporations, certified B Corps. And this is probably something, it's food for thought, which then brings me to the other point, and which is what I've been talking to a lot of my industrialist friends, is the government of India. Do you influence policy for the government of India, or do you actually wait for the government of India to impose policy on you? And are you guided more by what they influence industry, or is it a two-way street, or is it a one-way street? Because I believe that there is an inherent responsibility on business and industry to influence policy in India with the government. And I think that's something where someone like Godrej could play a big part. And I do know that legacy-wise, there was a lot of this happening from your ancestors, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think also, you know, if one has to look at metrics, and you look at performance metrics, and you look at, let's say, sustainability metrics for the same company, it could be we often see them in isolation. And by doing that, we really kind of detract from having a holistic sense of the company, because you can think the company is doing excellently, but is not able to kind of endure, be sustainable over the medium and long term. So I think one conscious choice that we have made is to look at hybrid metrics across our businesses, and to really look at how are we embedding it? Because in India we have this concept of the 2% CSR, and a lot of the kind of sustainability discussions focus on it as an ancillary kind of add-on to your core business, but we prefer to kind of flip it and look at it as the 98%, that we need to make our core business sustainable, whether it's processes, whether it's products, and whether it's the skilling ecosystem, because today a large part of the supply chain is micro, small and medium companies, and the maturity levels are widely variant, and it is also one of the most difficult, let's say, externalities, because scope 3 is very, very difficult to control, but a key contributor, and therefore, how do you do it? And so, over the last 20 years, we've been working on a green supply chain program, where we work with our suppliers, whether it's from a green perspective, a digital perspective. But it is it's not an audit. It's not something that you can sort of do one time. It does take a lot of hand-holding. It does take a lot of time and effort, and it has to be sustained. So that for us is a big priority. Have we made as much success as we would like to have made to shift the needle? Probably not. But I think that is one of the focus areas. And I think it's very important for us, especially like in industries like aerospace, where even on the civil aviation side, we work with a lot of, the leading OEMs, and you are as good as your supply chain. So no matter what you do within the company, from a process, from a quality, from a systems angle, you have to get it first time right, and you can't be wrong. And not doing it first time right is very expensive. It leads to rework. It leads to lack of trust. It leads to escalations in cost, and therefore the ecosystem becomes crucial to companies' success, and companies cannot be successful on their own.
So finally, to sum up, Nyrika, what would be sort of one of the comments you would like to give to the young generation in this hall about the future? What do you think holds the most importance for their journey into the next 5 or 10 years for the next generation that's coming up? What would you like to share with them from your learnings and your experience, and for them to take away and mull over?
Yeah, I think that humility is very important, and because we live in such a volatile world where things can change overnight, technology, if we look at AI and what it has done to the operating systems and to the whole to countries, I think being able to learn and having that learning mindset, I think, is very important for all ages, and not being complacent. I think being always curious and willing to learn, but most importantly, I think we are here for a limited period of time, and our role should be that of a custodian and a steward, and we should leave whatever we were given stronger and better than we received it. And I think that idea of how do we, also learn to pass on, to nurture, and to ensure that the organization or wherever we work or wherever we're putting our energies is inevitably larger than any one of us, and therefore looking at the organization and what is right and best for the organization is something which is the lens with which we should see things, and I think importantly have fun and enjoy and be passionate about whatever you're doing. Because finally, I think that is the most important. It should give you fulfillment and it should make you feel happy.
Wow, thank you very much. Thanks, Nyrika.
Thank you.
We can open the floor for the Q&A.
Godrej has strong exposure to construction and engineering and manufacturing. So do you see physical AI being a core differentiator in upcoming future for execution and construction?
So we are using it a lot in our modeling, in our analytics, and in all aspects of operations. But I think today, if one has to look at, let's say, the construction industry, since you spoke about that, I think there are a lot of skills today which cannot be replicated by AI, whether it's carpentry, whether it's plumbing, whether it's electrification or HVAC. I think those skills will always be relevant. And how does one use AI more to improve efficiency, but also maybe think about how we can build out some of these skills and competencies which are not going to be taken away by AI. And how do we really look at building more salience within those? And I think that goes across to engineering, to even customer experiences, that AI can be an enabler, but I think we need to invest in skill development, upskilling, and making people equipped to be able to deal with changes going ahead. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah. So like if I'm talking about the physical AI, like which can be used in construction, or like in India, many companies are building that robotic AIs and which can be used in bridges. So Godrej is also like working towards it because it's one of the largest companies. So yeah.
So we are using it, but we are using it more. So we don't do infrastructure per se, but we do real estate development, and we do building materials. So I think maybe in the modeling to bring up the project faster, to look at coordination between different teams when you are actually building a residential or a commercial complex. So I think there is where we are currently using it today. And yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry about holding the mics. I'll just be a minute. My question to Godrej, to me, is among the only few brands, if not only, in India that has been very intentional and vocal about their support for Pride. Thank you very much for the work you do. But also to scale inclusivity at the scale that you do, and also being able to reach the grassroots level. How do you do it?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. I think a company like ours, which has been very engineering centric, there's always been a discussion on even on women, that there are not enough women engineers, and therefore the diversity ratios aren't as strong as they ought to be. But I think a lot of that is changing now. I think maybe not as fast as we would like it to be, but we're seeing changes even on our shop floor in, let's say, precision engineering, aerospace. You have women in lead design roles, lead welding roles. And I think that and some of our factories, even our locks factory, is a fully women-run factory. And I think maybe replicating and building that out, and really looking at diversity as a superpower, because I think if everybody has a singular perspective and a singular approach, there isn't much learning because you're not able to challenge each other. And I think that challenge and that creative friction is really what leads to growth and resilience. And so it's something that we have to focus on and ensure that we're allowing it to thrive in the best possible way.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Holkar. The Vikhroli development has been a beacon for sustainable construction. But if we can just humor us with an out-of-body experience across the creek to a small developer for the first time, doing this, without hacking through capital, labor. How can they bring in the same sustainable practices in construction and development in India? I think there's a huge gap between the top tier and then the vast majority of these developers.
Yeah, I think that it's a very real tension because a lot of the, let's say, sustainable investments have to be upfronted and the benefit comes later. But I think green has to be good for business. And one can see that even in a climate context, when we're looking at the risks that come as a result of climate change, it is effectively operating risk. And to be able to mitigate that, we have to not only look at sustainability through the lens of, let's say, revenue growth, where you have new pools of revenue coming from, let's say, sustainable products. But importantly, I think the cost angle, because if you're using less resources and bringing down the cost, you're also more efficient because you can do more with less. And I think that has to be the underlying rationale, because otherwise it's very difficult to justify any investment. And I think that is very important, to be able to not see it again as something ancillary that one needs to do as a sort of a good to have, but how do you really use it to make your business more efficient? And we have seen that we've been able to really bring down costs. We've been able to create different pools of revenue, and importantly, we've been able to make the system resilient. So, and we spoke about also the sort of MSME, and I think that piece is also important because, yes, you cannot expect a small and medium company to be able to have the resources to be able to do it at a large scale. So how, and comes back to the point that I was speaking about, collaboration. Like what more can industry do to allow MSMEs to thrive? And I think one key part about and a proposal that was also given by Niti Aayog and their Frontier Tech Hub creation that they are proposing to do to the government, the idea of creating shared capacity where because high investments in plant and machinery may not be able to be feasible. So can we think about creating shared capacity, sort of time share, as it were, in facilities that allow the whole country to move up the value chain. And yeah, it's not going to happen overnight. I think established companies have to play a greater role. I think government also has to be able to incentivize behavior. And we've seen even with the adoption of, like, let's say, LED lights. Through government incentives, now nearly 98% of the country is on LED. And I think that those kind of interventions where public-private partnerships can work together more effectively to be able to do that and to bring even small enterprises up, I think is something which we collectively have to focus on.
Okay, thank you, Nyrika, for your wonderful insights. And I think if we want to become a Viksit Bharat by 2047, we have to follow some of those steps. So thank you all. I think now I will invite Suyash Bhatt from Global Education Lab to facilitate both of the guests. And please, a round of applause for the both of them.
Thank you.